When we are trying to see how sociologists study gender and how they explain gender and how they understand gender, we should be clear about and we should be familiar with some basic concepts in sociology that have a relationship with the understanding of gender and gender related issues. There are some basic terms and some basic concepts which we will frequently come across in gender related literature. First of all, status, a term which is very commonly used, not only in sociology but in everyday terminology and everyday vocabulary also. What is status? What does status refer to? Status is a category or a position a person occupies that is a significant determinant of how he or she will be defined and treated. So when we say status, as we commonly say, we are referring to the rank that the person has in the society. And we treat people usually according to their status. If somebody is higher in status, they are given respect. If somebody is lower than our status, then we expect them to respect us. A status can be ascribed or it can be achieved. Ascribed status is the status that we are born with, the status that we have inherited from our parents. And when we apply the same concept to gender, our sex is the status that we had inherited or that we were born with. Achieved status, on the other hand, is the one that a person earns after effort and after hard work. So, a person at the same time has an ascribed status and the person also has an achieved status. At times, people may have more than one status at the same time. Like a person may be a teacher at one time, and in the evening, the person may be working as a nurse. There are two positions that the person is holding. So, if people are holding more than one status at one time, it is called a status set. Social stratification, a system whereby members of a society are categorized according to their status, and these statuses are further ranked. We see that in all societies there is a system of social stratification. The society is stratified into different groups, different categories, and usually those categories are the status that people in that society hold. Low-ranked people with a very low ascribed status will have the least respect in the society, and people who have an achieved status and who have earned as a result of that status, they will be respected more in the society. And this is how the social stratification system works, ranking from lowest to the highest positions in the society. Role, the expected behavior associated with a status. With every status comes a role. When the society gives a certain status to a person, or when a person has earned a status in the society expects the person to act and behave accordingly. The person has to perform the role that is associated with that particular status that the person has. For example, when people have earned wealth, people expect them to spend some of their wealth to the other people in the society. When the person has earned the status of a father, the family expects that the person will look after the family. So, with every status, there comes a role that a person has to perform. If the person is not performing that role, then the person may face problems in many ways. Social norms, shared rules that guide people's behavior in specific situations. We know that our status and accordingly our social roles depend upon the social norms in many ways. The social norms determine how we have to behave, when, and why. Social norms are standards according to which people have to behave. And this is why the word normal that comes out of norm, that is what most people do. So in any society, what most people do, and which is a regular routine way of behaving in a society, then it becomes a norm or a normal behavior. Norms provide us two functions. Norms are a standard with which we compare ourselves. So, they are standards which we want to meet. At the same time, they have a comparative role. They give us a point with which we can compare our performance and our behavior and our status. Stereotypes, oversimplified conceptions that people who occupy the same status group share certain traits in common. Stereotypes are commonly held beliefs about certain type of people. And we hold those beliefs that people belonging to this group or this status will be behaving in a particular manner. And all these things apply to the understanding and perception of genders also. We have prefix beliefs that women behave like this, and we have prefix beliefs that men behave like this. This is something very masculine, this is something very feminine. These are basically stereotypes. Stereotypes are the things, the beliefs, which are not research-based. These are not objective. These are mostly subjective, based upon our own perception, our own belief system, and the way we have seen most people saying and believing. Gender roles, just like roles, social roles which are associated with certain status, similarly, gender roles are associated with certain genders. That is, this is the way a man should behave, this is the way a woman has to behave. These are the expected attitudes and expected ways that the society has fixed for men and women or the transgenders. Sexism, generally having positive attitude towards one's own gender and negative towards the other gender. Sexism is a term that you commonly come across nowadays. Just like racism, sexism is when you have very positive attitudes towards your own sex, and when you have negative attitudes towards the other sex. So we can say that it is a sort of a bias, positive bias towards our own gender and a negative bias towards the other gender or the other sex. Sexism emerges from the belief that status of females is inferior to males. Maybe there is a society where the status of men is inferior and women's status is superior, but generally in most societies, men usually have a higher position, a higher status in the society as compared to the position and the status of women. And this is something which gives rise to and which also emerges from sexism. Patriarchy, male-dominated social structures leading to the oppression of women. It is a social system headed by men as heads of the family, institution, or tribe. Patriarchy is another term which is very commonly used these days. We often come across literature which talks about patriarchy, patriarchal system, patriarchal attitudes. Patri, the word comes from father. In simplest terms, we can say in a society where male is the head of the family, or male is the head of chief or head of the tribe, they are following a patriarchal system. So when we say patriarchy, we usually see that there is a system in which there is a positive bias for men and there is a negative bias for women. It's a social system headed by men as heads of families and heads of institutions. But we also know that besides learning these terminologies, we know that now the systems are changing. There are places, there are institutions, there are organizations which are headed by women now. Androcentrism, male-centered norms operating throughout all social institutions that become the standards to which all persons adhere. Androcentrism is a term that we often read in research literature talking about gender issues. This is a way of thinking. This is an attitude in which the center of attention is the male thinking the male-mindedness is over there, and the male belief is in the upper position. It has roots in patriarchy, and the male view is central. So whatever men think, whatever men like, whatever their attitudes are, they are considered to be the reality, and they are considered to be followed by other people, including women. So these are some of the terms and some of the concepts that we have to be very clear about before we go for research into gender issues, and before we go and study and analyze the available research literature talking about gender studies.